Game at Baltimore, President Trump will set foot in Charm City tomorrow. Horace Cooper and Leo Terrell are here on the protests that are expected. But first, 9/11, lessons forgotten. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Each year on September 11th, we say we'll never forget. We remember where we were on that horrific day. I was here in Washington. The tear-streaked faces of family members that were desperately trying to find loved ones who, frankly, had already died, but they held out hope. And we haven't forgotten the brave first responders, the fathers, the sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, thousands of others who lost their lives.
Marie Rose Abad.
Andrew Anthony Abate.
Irina Busolo.
Kathleen Ann Burns.
Marlon Capito Bautista.
Mark Lawrence Davis.
But did we really learn the lessons from 9/11? All these years later, it seems like many have forgotten who carried out these attacks and the sick Islamist ideology that motivated them. We speak in vague terms about an attack on our freedom, and we commemorate 9/11 respectfully, but that's not enough. Bin Laden's dead, but the radical mindset that motivated twisted men to kill themselves and 2,977 others didn't die with him. We saw it inspire a deadly bombing at a Paris nightclub. We saw it play out on a London bridge, at the Boston Marathon, at Fort Hood, at a U.S. diplomatic outpost in Benghazi, Libya, at a Catholic Mass in Sri Lanka on Easter Sunday. They used guns and bombs and knives and chemicals and cars to cause maximum pain and bloodshed. Now, these attacks and many more happened despite our sending hundreds of thousands of men and women into battle in Iraq and Afghanistan, and despite our borrowing trillions of dollars to pay for it all. Although we did make it harder for law-abiding Americans to fly on commercial airplanes, we still haven't taken some of the most common-sense steps here at home to really make us safer. Remember, at least 5 of the 19 hijackers overstayed their visas, a tactic used by dozens of convicted terrorists since then to infiltrate our country. Yet we still haven't cracked down on visa overstays in this country. Now look at this chart. It's infuriating. More than 666,000 overstayed their visas last year alone. Most will never leave America voluntarily. Each and every one of these individuals should be found and sent home. And the failure to learn doesn't stop there. Astonishingly, we still haven't implemented some of the key recommendations of the 9/11 Commission, like biometric screenings of all foreigners traveling on visas into the United States. This would help us track people once they're here. And it could have helped avert 9/11 in the first place. Of course, President Trump has taken practical steps to secure the homeland. It took him to do it. The travel ban from terror watch list countries, extreme vetting. Of course, he fought to get the wall built, and we're starting that. Changing the asylum process. We're finally getting military help from Mexico, and a lot more. And all of these measures, by the way, have been challenged by the left in courts, by Congress, and of course by nonprofits funded by the Open Borders lobby. Michelle Malkin was on last night laying that out. Hollywood celebrities vilified the president for doing what should have been done long ago, again, to keep America safe. We can't ask American soldiers, I don't think, to fight in faraway lands to enforce other countries' borders as we resist enforcing our own. Does that make any sense? In the wake of 9/11, the government established, remember, the Department of Homeland Security. It was supposed to streamline our efforts to fill in the gaps in order to keep Americans safe and stay ahead of all these new types of threats. Last year, we spent $74 billion on Homeland Security, Yet we still had tens of thousands of individuals making their way across our border every month. That's a decrease, by the way. Now, how is that learning the lessons of 9/11? Why would we risk endangering the lives of American citizens? Set aside the pocketbook cost of all of this. With even a small percentage of criminals, or even one terrorist, if one terrorist got through, if we could have stopped them from ever entering the country in the first place. On this anniversary of 9/11, we must acknowledge that not only do some influential Americans not respect the rule of law, this common sense measures that were recommended to us after 9/11, they don't even respect our first responders.
Abolishing ICE protects my families from the militarization that is happening in our neighborhoods.
We need to ensure we have a national use of force standard and that we end qualified immunity for police officers so that we can hold them accountable for using excessive force.
To make sure that police departments look like the communities that they serve, not like an oppressive army.
How's that all these years after 9/11? The left relentlessly trashing cops and Border Patrol agents on the front lines, undermining their authority and making their jobs, frankly, more dangerous. Now, contrast this with what President Trump said Monday to honor those courageous first responders during the Dayton and El Paso mass shootings.
These incredible patriots responded to the worst violence and most barbaric hatred with the best of American courage, character, and strength. Faced with grave and harrowing threats, the men and women standing behind us stepped forward to save the lives of their fellow Americans. Few people could have done, and even would have done, what they did.
And we shouldn't just praise law enforcement after mass shootings. Good to do that, but it's not enough to praise them after big anniversaries like today. We should honor their bravery every day. I know President Trump does, as they carry out their very difficult jobs. And by the way, their work will be made easier, and Americans will end up safer if we don't allow foreign criminals or would-be terrorists into the country in the first place, getting back to the first point. Wouldn't all of this be a meaningful, truly meaningful tribute to those who died on 9/11? And that's the angle. Here to respond is Ed Mullins, president of the NYPD Sergeants Benevolent Association. And Ed, you were an NYPD officer during the 9/11 attack. Is the disrespect that officers are enduring, both on the streets and uniformed law enforcement at our borders, having an impact on our safety and their morale?
No doubt, Laura. The police officers that are out there today protecting the American people are under much more scrutiny, and there's a very, very strong anti-police sentiment that exists. Having gone through the NYPD from the 80s to the present time, there's always going to be people who like and dislike police officers. On 9/11, you didn't have enough police officers. 18 years ago tonight, NYPD, firefighters, iron workers were all on a pile saving lives. 18 years later, police officers are now the enemy of the people. And ultimately, you're really not hurting the police. What you're doing is you're hurting yourselves, because without law being enforced, we have a lawless society. We have more victims. And that's going to infringe upon each person's freedom. And I don't understand, as many police officers don't understand, why people don't see this. We are promoting the criminal, and we are condemning the police officer. It makes no sense.
Well, the criminal's motivations and family upbringing are taken into account, but the snap judgment that police officers have to make, Ed, life and death judgment, at a moment's notice, they always want to assume the worst. Always. And I want to play something for you, if you don't mind. This was from today. Tom Holman, of course, former acting ICE director, he was at a hearing on Capitol Hill and was trying to make this, point about respect for ICE and people trying to help at our border. And he kept being interrupted by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Watch.
In my 34 years, I've never seen such hate toward law enforcement agency in my life that you want to abolish them rather than doing your job and legislate. If they don't like it, legislate.
His time has expired. I think when someone who served this country, as he did for so many years, wants to make a point about what these men and women at the border need and interior enforcement, he should be allowed to finish his sentence. That's just a small example, but it's meant to shut him down and to take his voice away.
Well, the job of the people, the job of the representatives in the House of Congress is to be a voice of the people, and you have to listen to the people. You know, Congresswoman Cortez, you have to remember, was elected by a very small majority of voters in a district where there was poor voter turnout. She does not speak for America. She does not speak for the American people. We have a president that was elected by the people who speaks for the American people. And thank God for law enforcement, that he's a person who supports law enforcement. But what she is going through is her 15 minutes of fame right now. And to not allow someone to speak is really improper in the House of Representatives for that to happen, especially when we're talking English speakers.
Ed, again, 18 years after 9/11, we had so many first responders lose their lives. I want to play this incident from September 5th, where police officers, again, treated like dirt, stuff thrown at them by the citizens that they are actually trying to protect. Watch.
Go ahead. They got milk on.
Throwing gallons of milk and so forth at the police, and I guess they're just supposed to smile and say, have a good day.
Well, Laura, in New York City, we have Mayor de Blasio. We have a police commissioner who follows the policies of Mayor de Blasio. And, you know, New York City police officers have been under attack for the last, 4 years that we've been going through, 5 years with Mayor de Blasio. We're seeing this across the country. On the anniversary of 9/11, I'd like to just get across to law enforcement across the country, the men and women serving in law enforcement, that we need to hold that line. We need to stand shoulder to shoulder and defend the laws of this country and defend the Constitution that we've been sworn to protect, and encourage the American people that we will lead the way to have a law and order society contrary to this anti-police atmosphere.
Well, but the elected representatives, Ed, I don't mean to interrupt you, but the elected representatives have to be behind law enforcement as well by saying, yes, these are the laws that have been duly passed, signed into law by the president or the governor, if it's a state law, or the mayor, if mayor's involved. And that's it. The laws are enforced. But that's not what's happening, and that's a breakdown of law and order. That's why all these years after 9/11, I think there are too many people who still don't get it. Ed, you are a true patriot. You saw the best and the worst of humanity on that day in both attacks on the World Trade Center, and we just really, really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, I also want to bring in Terry Strada. She lost her husband on 9/11 and is the national chair of the 9/11 Families and Survivors United for Justice. Terry's with us now. Thanks for being here, Terry. My first question to you is, you lost your husband. You had just given birth. I believe it was 4 days before 9/11. He just went in for a half day.
Yes.
And he never came home. How do you process this day, let alone any other day?
It's a very difficult day, Laura. From the moment the alarm goes off in the morning, and it reminds me, he was here at 7 o'clock in the morning. He was still alive, and he was taking a shower, and he was saying goodbye to the children and kissing each and every one of them. And he left and turned around and said, I'll be home early. I'll be home before 2. And I never saw him again. I did speak to him. He did call me that morning after the plane hit the building, and it was a terrifying phone call, and it was just a nightmarish of a day to live through.
Terry, I want to get your thoughts on the mind-boggling fact that the mastermind of 9/11, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, will not face trial until 20 years after 9/11. 2021, it looks like that's when his trial will begin.
I know.
We got him back in 2003. What does this say to the family?
Well, the families need to heal, and we can't heal as long as these perpetrators are not, held accountable and held to justice in the courtroom. But I've been to Guantanamo Bay, and I've met the prosecution team, and I have a lot of respect for them. I believe they have given up so much of their time and so much of their lives to try this case, and they want to get it right. So they are collecting all the evidence that they can, so when we get in the courtroom, it'll be done right. Excuse me, and it's what the families deserve, and we will get justice.
And I know families such as yours are adamant that Saudi Arabia's role in whatever connection, we know all the hijackers who came from Saudi Arabia, U.S. government endeavored to interview many of the family members, connected associates to the 9/11 hijackers. I do not believe our government was ever allowed to do those types of in-depth interviews, but we do have some information, and yet that has not been unredacted. In an ongoing lawsuit that I know is seeking some relief, you want some answers.
Yes, we absolutely want answers. And tomorrow the DOJ is supposed to file a motion on documents that have been kept from us all these years. And we're hopeful that we're going to see some truths come out tomorrow. We don't know exactly. We're kind of on pins and needles here, waiting to see what happens. But there is a name that talks about, there is the name that tasked the two Saudi agents that were here in the United States out in San Diego. Their names were Bayumi and Thumali, and they were tasking the hijackers while they were here. So we need to know the name of that Saudi individual who was tasking these two Saudi agents here in this country. And once we get that name, there's a lot more that we need to uncover.
Yeah, Terry, this has been 18 years of heartache and hurt for you and almost 3,000 other Americans. And the fact that we haven't learned all the lessons still all these years later is really infuriating. It all came back to me today. I mean, I was here, I saw the Pentagon's in flame, I was on my bike, I'm really doing this show tonight for my friend Barbara Olson, who was killed in a plane that went into the Pentagon. She was a dear friend of mine. She literally could make me laugh at any moment of the day, anytime. She was an awesome person.
Right.
And you would have loved her. And we honor your husband and all those who gave their lives, those innocent Americans. And we just appreciate your fighting for justice and fighting for the truth. And your husband looked like an incredible man.
Well, thank you. And we have a wonderful president now who is on our side and fighting alongside with us. He actually invited some of us down to the White House this morning just to share with the moment of silence on the South Lawn, and then invited us in just to give us his condolences and let us hear a couple of our stories. And he's just a wonderful man, and the First Lady was there too, and it was an honor to meet both of them.
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
I'm so glad. And he honors our police officers and our first responders.
Yes, he does.
Every day, not just on the big days. Terry, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And coming up, the son of a 9/11 victim lashes out at Ilhan Omar. And why is the media using this solemn day to attack the president? Well, Dinesh D'Souza and Raheem Kassam with Can't Miss Reaction next.
CARE was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties.
Oh my God, every time I hear that, it infuriates me anew. Those vile words, even more disgusting when you hear them on this day. This morning at Ground Zero, heartbroken family members read the names, once again, of 9/11 victims. Nicholas Harros Jr., whose mother Frances was killed that day, lashed out at Congresswoman Omar and her callous "some people did something" remarks.
Some people did something, said a freshman congresswoman from Minnesota. Today I am here to respond to you exactly who did what to whom. On that day, 19 Islamic terrorist members of Al-Qaeda killed over 3,000 people and caused billions of dollars of economic damage. Is that clear? I was attacked. Your relatives and friends were attacked. Our constitutional freedoms were attacked. And our nation's founding on Judeo-Christian principles were attacked. That's what some people did. Got that now?
Joining me now, Dinesh is a conservative commentator. Dinesh, that was quite a moment. Are you concerned that some on the radical left are diminishing what really occurred or purposely putting blinders on for their own political expediency?
I think we're witnessing what can be called a 9/11 minimization strategy. And the strategy is to shift the blame away from who did this and why they did it, and point it anywhere else. I was struck just today, the New York Times, they put out a tweet and then they deleted it. But the tweet is illuminating because the tweet basically said, it pointed the finger at the airplanes. It says the airplanes, quote, took aim at the buildings and, quote, brought them down. Now, ordinarily, this would be crazy, a kind of animism in which you attribute intentionality to inanimate objects. Why are they doing this? Well, what they're trying to do is avoid saying that Islamic radicals did this in the name of Islam. Now remember, if white supremacists had done it, they'd be all over it.
Oh, yeah.
But they have to protect this notion of radical Islam for reasons of political alliance.
Yeah, well, so otherwise, Ilhan Omar would get upset, and others in the Congress would get upset, and CARE would get upset. But heaven forbid the American people get upset. So you're right, they deleted the tweet. But amnesia really usually is something that happens to you, but they're bringing on their own amnesia, or they never understood it in the first place. There is also another point, and Dinesh, you've spoken at so many universities over the years, you've written about the craziness on college campuses, but there's a professor at Northwestern University in Qatar who tweeted today, "Happy 9/11. More than 8,441 civilians died in Yemen this year, helped by U.S. arms dealt to Saudi Arabia and UAE. The U.S. is complicit in far more terror than it has ever suffered." We reached out to Northwestern to find out what they thought about one of their professors tweeting this on this day, but have not heard back. Dinesh, fact is, there are a lot of professors out there who agree with that they might not be stupid enough to tweet it, correct?
Right, and there's a false equivalence here. Look, this is a sacred event because of the targeting, the deliberate targeting of civilians. There's no comparison between that and what's going on in Yemen. This would be almost like if we were talking about Auschwitz and the New York Times were to tweet out, some people did something, or they tweet out that the concentration camps, quote, took aim at the Jews and, quote, brought them down. No, the concentration camps didn't do that. The Nazis did that. So why are you covering up for the bad guys and pretending that inanimate objects are the ones responsible here?
Yeah, because then the travel ban would have made sense, right? Then extreme vetting would make sense. Then policing our borders would make sense. But if once you admit that, their entire construct falls apart. It shatters into a million pieces. That's why they won't admit it. It's patently obvious to anyone who has half a brain cell. And I think academia, Dinesh, and the Hollywood and the media elite and some in politics, they're all together in this. They're all in the same playpen with the 9/11 amnesia. And it extends beyond that to a whole host of other issues. Final thought.
A decade ago in a book called The Enemy at Home, I predicted, I didn't know anything about Ilhan Omar, that there was an alliance emerging between the most liberal and the most illiberal forces in the world, and that radical Islam was becoming weirdly allied with the progressive left in this country. And I'm sorry to say that sort of dire prediction is now very evidently true, and Ilhan Omar is the sort of walking embodiment of it.
Oh, the intersectionality of it all. Dinesh, thank you so much. And 9/11 is normally a solemn day of remembrance, yet this morning CNN took the opportunity to hit Trump and equate right-wing terror with radical Islamic terror.
There is an absence of memory about 9/11. We've seen a president from New York float the truly awful idea of pushing the Taliban at Camp David for withdrawal talks within days of the 9/11 anniversary. But in the past year, we've also been forced to confront a growing threat from another form of violent extremism, white nationalist terrorism. Since 9/11, right-wing terrorists have killed more people in the United States than jihadist terrorists. That's according to New America.
Joining me now, Raheem Kassam, fellow at the American Principles Project. Raheem, Explain what New America is, the source just cited by CNN.
So what CNN did this morning, Laura, is the perfect example of laundering information around the DC bubble, around the swamp. New America is a 20-year-old think tank in Washington, D.C., staffed by the same people who staff all the other think tanks, who are on all the boards of all the other think tanks, whether it's Brookings Institution and all this stuff. It's the same sort of crowds that we see. On that board is CNN's Fareed Zakaria. So you have CNN there quoting a CNN source without declaring an interest. They then go on to cite a report written by New America, which was written by another CNN employee, CNN's national security analyst, Peter Bergen. So CNN reporting on CNN is where they're getting their information from. CNN's sources, as the president always says, there are no sources for some of the things they said. Turns out the sources themselves.
Well, there's Ilhan Omar is upset. Speaking of her, Dinesh raised her. She's upset because of this idea that we should be able to check immigrants, or people coming aboard, maybe asylees, refugees, their social media to find out what their intent is, or maybe to get some idea of what they want to do once they come here. Heaven forbid, all these years after 9/11. This is what she said. Make no mistake, this is fascism in action. There's no guarantee that the Trump administration won't weaponize immigrants' political views against them by denying entry. Like, why should we allow someone to enter the country if they think we're an evil terrorist entity that should be brought down? Is she saying we should bring them into the country?
if I tweeted the
that's fascist,
should be overthrown and returned to a monarchy, as I might tweet one day, then you would expect that when I apply for my visa, as I have done, and I've sat in front of your embassy in London and begged my case, when I sit there, should they not know that I've said that? Should they not take that into consideration before affording me the luxury of being here and living here? And just to finalise on that, on the CNN point from earlier, because all of this stuff comes together, doesn't it? The New York Times, had an article about 160,000 birds migratory patterns being affected, almost as if 3,000 people dead is not enough. We've got to add birds into the mix. That will really
that'll be an acceptable tragedy.
Yeah, exactly. And then you see what the CNN is doing with all of this, and now you hear what Ilhan Omar's doing, and the fact that they gaslight by they put CNN on the Chiron, they put amnesia at the bottom of the screen.
They're the ones who have amnesia.
They're the ones with the amnesia.
I didn't even know that was a Chiron, and when I said what I said, I didn't even know that was
the ones
Chiron
who are intentionally trying to steer the ordinary Americans' views away from what really happened on 9/11, and they're accusing the rest of us of having amnesia. It's disgusting.
No, it's even worse than that. The enemy is not political Islam, Islamism, radical Islam. That's not the enemy. The enemy is us, our way of life, our traditions, our patriotism, our president. That's what the enemy is. That American historical understanding. Raheem, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We could have talked Brexit too. All right, coming up. Are you ready for a female James Bond? What about a feminist version of the game Monopoly? Who's going to play that? Raymond Arroyo here with all the details. Up next. Female James Bond, a feminist Monopoly, and U.S. history gone totally awry. Joining us with all the details, Raymond Arroyo, Fox News contributor. All right, Raymond, let's start with the former James Bond, Pierce Brosnan's pronouncement.
Yes, Laura, the four-time Bond star, told The Hollywood Reporter of 007 this week, I think we've watched the guys do it for 40 years. Let's get out of the way, guys, and put a woman up there. I think it would be exhilarating. It would be exciting. Not everybody is so bullish on a female Bond, Laura, including former Bond girl, Valerie Leon.
I am in mourning that we're here to talk about Bond being a woman. We're not. He was conceived as a man. That is how Ian Fleming saw him. He's been successful all these years. We don't want to see him as a woman.
Ian Fleming built this character as a composite of commandos and spies he knew in actual service. It was never meant to be, polygender here. It was supposed to be.
Polygender.
I'm creating a new term.
Raymond just created a new term. Polygender.
Well, it was also an escapist male fantasy. Fast cars, quick kills, the Bond girls. I think you do lose something if you recast the character as a woman.
Let's just say this is stupid.
Okay,
this is stupid. Get over yourselves. You can have your own superhero. Should Wonder Woman be a man?
Wonder Boy.
Wonder Man. It's just so dumb.
Well, here's the
stupidest thing ever.
This is all bubbling up because in the latest James Bond, the one that's going to be released in the spring, they announced 007 come in walks this beautiful black actress, Lashana Lynch, okay? Yeah. She is the new 007. So everybody's trying to justify it. But Laura, the female Ghostbusters reboot, bomb. The Kitchen, which was a heist film with Melissa McCarthy, bomb.
We need a sound effect for that.
Create original heroes with women.
You know what's really tedious? Are producers, writers, directors, and people who live derivative lives. They can't live their own life. They have to suck off the energy of other people's franchises. They're like, just come up with your own idea.
I agree.
It's pathetic. All right, what else?
Well, while we're talking feminizing cultural icons, Hasbro is announcing a new version of Monopoly. Mrs. Monopoly. Ms. Monopoly. It creates, I'm trying to upgrade her, it creates a world where women have an advantage often enjoyed by men. Women are paid $240 when they pass go. Men are paid the customary $200. Do you like this idea, Laura?
I might want to play Ms. Monopoly as long as it's real money. I'm joking. It's
I don't like the idea that what we're talking about here, it's pandering to girls and it condescends. I wouldn't want my daughter. My daughter wants an even playing field. So we were thinking, Laura, how would this play out? What might it look like if we did this? And the prompter's not there, so I'm going to run through this myself. We took the old top hat from Monopoly and replaced it with a pussy hat.
Oh,
a big pussy.
Oh my God, that is one. That's weird.
We created it. And then what about the get out of jail card? What might that look like?
Oh,
so
that's good.
There's Ms. Monopoly.
That's good. Well, I actually kind of lost my affection for Monopoly when the little players, they turned them into like lightweight
plastic and not metal anymore.
The heavy metal.
The kids were choking on the lead probably. Go ahead.
All right, before we go, Susan Page tweeted this from Reagan Airport. 18 years ago at this moment, I was on a flight from DCA to NY. Today, I'm back at DCA waiting for a flight. There was an announcement asking for a moment of silence to remember the 9/11 attacks and those we lost. And to my dismay, almost no one stopped talking. If I were on that plane, it would not have.
Well, this was in the airport. This was in DCA. But what this tells you is we have a culture who is forgotten. Young people don't care. There was a new study that just came out, and this is pretty important. It shows colleges, only 18% of them insist that kids study basic government facts or history, U.S. history. The same study found, Laura, 26% of college graduates thought Kavanaugh was the Chief Justice of the U.S., 14% thought it was Antonin Scalia, and 18% thought AOC was the author of the New Deal. This, we have to be very careful. I mean, we're making fun of this. This is funny, kind of slip facts. But when you lose and forget something like 9/11 and have no reverence for the loss of life, you've lost something, and you're not prepared for the next tragedy and the next danger that lies ahead.
Two of my older kids, they both studied it in school today, and I quizzed them. Oh, they knew it. Maybe it's because I've drilled it.
Yeah, drilled it since they were.
No, but they learned it in school, and I was really happy to hear that. Raymond, thank you very much for tonight, as always. And up next, it's hard to say who was more upset by the results of the North Carolina special election last night. Were the Democrats more upset they lost, or the media? Dan Bongino, Chris Hahn face off next for that debate. Two media narratives, two bubbles burst. Here to debate is Dan Bongino, Fox News contributor, author of the upcoming book Exonerated. Also with me is Chris Hahn, former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer and host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. All right, gentlemen, let's get right into this. Now, we all saw this coming, but the media eagerly hyped last night's special election. They saw trouble on the horizon for Trump and the Republicans when they thought the Democrat was going to win.
The race is incredibly close between Bishop and Democrat Dan McCready, and the president is now trying to downplay expectations for his guy.
What does it tell you that both the president and vice president have been there within the last 24 hours? Tells you they're worried.
If Republicans lose this seat, you think Trump's in trouble?
I think Trump's in trouble regardless.
Well, when the Democrat didn't win, pundits got kind of dour. CNN was clearly distraught over the results. Look at those faces. Dan, obviously we're just having fun with CNN, but the contortions we saw from the media following last night's results, they're kind of telling. If Trump wins, he still loses. You know, he loses and he loses. He wins and he loses. What's going on here, Dan?
This is This is the media eager to tell a story, not the story. And the story says what you just said. Sometimes examples work better. When Democrats come close but lose, like McCready did to Bishop yesterday in North Carolina, Laura, it's painted as, it was a moral victory. It was close. It's a Republican-leading district. We gave it the good old college try. It's a moral victory for the Dems. But when the Republicans actually win an election like Donald Trump, well, he lost the popular vote. Meanwhile, nobody wins, but that's not how that actually works, the system. And, well, the Russians did it. It's just, again, another example of the media eager to tell a story, not the story.
So, Chris, have you all become the party of moral victories? I mean, it's a victory in theory, if not an actual result.
I don't believe in moral victories in elections, Laura. You know that. We've been talking about this for a long time. A win is a win. Now, that said, it was an R11 district. They spent millions of dollars and had to have a presidential and vice presidential visit to pull out the victory. And if that's going to be the case across the country in R11 districts and lower, they're going to have a tough time in 2020. There really are no moral victories, but if you look at the numbers here, the Democrat way outperformed what they should have done in that district.
Okay, so you're doing it, though.
It's still, no, hold on. He's still lost, and I give credit to the Republicans for pulling out their vote, but it was a tough win. If they got to spend money in districts like that, they're not going to have enough to go around.
Like, we don't want to spend the whole segment on this, but I will say this. Dan, he was down, 17, 19 points 3 weeks before? Trump rolls into town with Pence, and the guy wins by 3. That tells me this president is extremely popular in a state like North Carolina that's gotten tougher and tougher for Republicans. That's what it tells me.
Right, and what Chris is conveniently leaving out there is McCready was a really good candidate who ran as a moderate, had a great pedigree, and the Democrats outspent the Republicans dramatically. Also, McCready was running for that seat, Laura, for 2 years, based on what happened in all the misfeasance and malfeasance in the left one.
All right,
It's not an R11 district.
Well, Bishop,
it's an R plus 11.
Okay, Bishop, guys, he's not the most dynamic candidate either. Candidates do matter. I mean, he got better over time, but he didn't come out of the gate very strong. So anyway, but I think Trump won that, and that is a good sign for 2020. So I smashed that narrative back. Gentlemen, the next big narrative, though, the media's been pushing, and I say hoping for, is an imminent recession.
The big sell-off on Wall Street today, troubling new signs the U.S. economy may be inching toward a recession.
New warning signs of a recession send stock prices plummeting.
Trump doesn't want to talk about the coming recession, which might be upon us.
Fears of a global recession. That's right, the R word.
Alvin Camerata was smiling when he said recession, I think. But the good news, of course, keeps rolling in. Latest data shows that household income finally, we're waiting for this, matching its 99 peak. The lowest poverty rate since 2001. Chris, how much longer can you Democrats actually ignore reality with the best economy of the G7? Wages up, optimism up. Why are you guys down talking this economy?
Well, look, I'm not down talking the economy, but people who are worried about trade wars and rumors of trade wars, economy for most people when they vote is a state of mind, not a set of numbers, Laura. And if the president keeps threatening trade